Ys the Ark of Napishtim, otherwise known as Ys 6, is an action-adventure RPG for the PS2 and PSP. However, this is primarily a review of the PS2 version. I've heard that the load times on the PSP version make it nearly unplayable. However, I can assure you that the load times are acceptable on the PS2 version. Due to the releases of Ys Chronicles 1 and 2, Ys 7, and Ys Othinfilgana, the series has gotten a bit of recognition in the recent years. However, most people aren't even aware of this game's existence. Now, before going into this, I do want to say that this game feels very much like a prototype for Othinfilgana, as it uses the same engine. However, it's much older. Othinfilgana kind of polished it. So just keep that in mind. Now to start, Ys 6's visuals are nothing special, but they're not bad either. On the PSP version, the game uses sprites, while the PS2 version uses 3D models. Either way, the game looks alright. Graphics are colorful, everything looks as it should, and the anime portraits adds a nice charm to the game. Now, there's the CG cutscenes. That I'm a little more mixed with. When the cutscenes are just showing scenery, however, it's quite nice. But whenever there's a character on screen, my god does it look awful. Luckily, the game allows you to, with the use of cheat codes by the way, to change these cutscenes to the anime ones, which are far superior. So be sure to do that. The music in this game, while not as memorable as some other entries in the series, is still very solid and has some really good tracks. If Falcom is known for anything, at least, it's that they've produced some of the finest music in gaming, and it still shows in this title as well. The game also sports some voice acting, which wasn't that bad, but wasn't that great either. It's pretty average overall, although it can dip into the almost unbearable at times. Luckily, that doesn't happen all too often. But you can still switch to the Japanese voice track instead by using cheat codes, which is a strange way of going about it, but it's better than nothing. The Japanese voice track is clearly superior. Ys 6's story is nothing in particularly special either. It's your fairly standard plot. Our fiery-headed and silent protagonist is in a strange land he's never been in before and must conquer the evil that has befallen it. It's pretty standard stuff, but there's some interesting characters along the way, as well as familiar faces to those who have more experience with the series. Now, like I said, this game is basically an action-adventure RPG. You, as Adol, can run around, defeat various enemies, and level up his stats. A defining feature in this game, however, are the three main swords that Adol uses: the Wind, Fire, and Lightning swords. Each sword is different, offering the different moveset, different stats, and different magical attacks. The Wind sword is the most balanced, offering medium speed and medium strength. The Fire sword is the strongest, but the slowest. And it also allows you to hold down the attack button for each strike in order to do more damage. And the Lightning sword is the weakest but the fastest, also allowing you to rapidly press the attack button for an extended combo. The game also has this ore that you can procure from defeated enemies that allow you to level up each sword individually. If you favor one sword over the other, you can choose to level it up more than the others, or balance it out and level up each of them at a time. This really makes the game fun and keeps it relatively fresh all throughout, as there are instances where one sword comes more handy than another. This game is also relatively challenging. However, on the harder difficulties like, well, hard and nightmare mode, the game can be pretty brutal, which is something that most are familiar with in the Ys series, as most games in this series, especially the older ones, can be pretty challenging. There's also plenty of boss fights that do well to spice up the gameplay and also add to the game's challenge. However, I have to say, if you've played Othinfilgana, the game doesn't feel quite as fast or quite as polished by comparison. Keep in mind that this game came out sometime before, and it was the first game to use this new engine that Falcom created. Despite that, I believe this game is still very much worth checking out. Overall, Ys 6, the Ark of Napishtim is a very solid game. While, like I said, not quite as polished as the newer Othinfilgana, if you like that game, I would still recommend this title. It will last you upwards to 15 or 16 hours on a regular playthrough, which isn't too shabby. Now, special thanks goes to my good friend Team Rival for sending me this game. Be sure to check him out in the description. Well, this has been Shintai, everyone. Take it easy.